and welcome to Diski Talk with Luyolo. If you're tuning in for the very first time, I do ask that you please subscribe and hit that notification bell. If you've been a part of this journey, I hope you thoroughly enjoy this episode. So, on today's episode, I discuss all things Kaizer Chiefs versus Golden Arrows as I have a post-match analysis of that encounter, which ended 1-0 in favor of Golden Arrows at the F&B Stadium. Coming up into this encounter then, it was quite important then that Golden Arrows do look to pick up the 3 points, and then Kaizer Chiefs were looking then to continue then with the momentum, having then won against Orlando Pirates in the Soweto derby. So the red team then will represent Kaizer Chiefs, and then the blue team will represent Golden Arrows. So when you have a look at Kaizer Chiefs then, they did line up in a 4-3-3. So in goals, they did start with Bruce Bavuma. And then when you have a look at the back four, at left back, they did start with Frosla. And then 2 centre backs, they started with Cardoso as the left-sided centre back, and then MATHOHO as the right-sided centre back. And when you then have a look at this centre back pairing, I think that in this performance, they were quite poor as a pair. But most importantly, I think Eric MATHOHO had a very, very bad game. And as a result of that, he was substituted at halftime. And his mistake was what led to the goal. And the worst part then, when you look at his mistake, is that there wasn't even sufficient pressure even being put on him. And he just then plays a very loose pass. Well, it doesn't even really constitute for a pass, you know. It's just a ball that's just played in no man's land, really. Mutizwa picks it up, and then he chips the goalkeeper. And I just think that MATHOHO was very, very poor on the day. And even then, at times, as the game progressed, second half, Cardoso was also making mistakes. I just think that this centre-back pairing has, it was a very, very bad performance for them, for this Kaizer Chiefs side. And then at right back, they did start with Unjabulo Blom. Moving on then into the heart of midfield, they did then start with Unjabulo Ngobo, Parker, and then Nange. When you have a look then at this midfield 3, I must say that I was quite disappointed when Stuart Baxter did take Nange off at halftime, because I would think that from the midfield 3 within the first half, the more progressive and positive player was Nange, who at times was finding good passes, and he was also then pushing forward. He did have a couple of box entries and had a couple of shots on goal as well. So within this Kaizer Chiefs side, I would say that the one positive within the first half was Nange with regards to then how he was also progressing the ball. You know, it's just very sad then that he does get taken off, because he was one of the better players within this Kaizer Chiefs side. And when you have a look at this midfield, you know, they just lack creativity, they lack control, and they lacked intensity as well. They just couldn't grow into the game. They couldn't find that momentum with regards then to progressing the ball and stringing along those passes. It was only Nange at a couple of moments during the first half. However, throughout the game, then Kaizer Chiefs just couldn't grow into the game. And I just think then when you have a look at the midfield, especially then going into second half, and when you have a look at the fact that Stuart Baxter then makes 2 defensive changes, I think the most important thing then was for him to bring on Bacchus and Nkosi Ngobo at halftime. And I say that because Kaizer Chiefs really needed control and creativity within the heart of midfield, because then they just couldn't progress the ball, they couldn't impose themselves, they couldn't grow with regards then to connecting passes and being able then to institute those passing patterns. And their midfield was just flat on the day. And when you move on then right along and you have a look at the front 3, you started with Biliat on the left, Nukovic up front, and then Dolly on the right. And when you have a look at this front 3, I also think that they just had a very bad game, because they just couldn't grow into the game. And when you have a look then at Dolly, I think this was one of his one of his worst performances in a Kaizer Chiefs shirt, because he lost so many balls, and he just then couldn't grow into the game and ensure then that he offers Kaizer Chiefs that creativity. And at times even I just felt that from a Kaizer Chiefs perspective, there just wasn't enough energy, there wasn't enough intensity with regards to how they were looking to impose themselves. They couldn't even string along 5 passes at certain phases of the game, and I just think then it was a very lethargic and very poor performance. And when you do have a look at Nukovic, considering then he was coming up against a very physical centre-back pair in Zuke and Sibisi, I just think that it was a very easy encounter for them, especially considering then that Nukovic doesn't offer much mobility. He's always looking to hold up play, and it became then easy for them to defend then against a static forward line player as opposed to one who was mobile. And I think this is where then the introduction of a Dumisani Zuma could have actually proved to be key for this Kaizer Chiefs side. And also then when you have a Bacchus and Ngobo as well, I think those 3 players should have been introduced a lot earlier on within the game, because I think then they would have offered Kaizer Chiefs control, creativity and speed as well, especially considering then that Arrows then were well suited to defending against a very physical player. Whereas when you have then a Dumisani Zuma who's a lot more mobile, he then can look then to make those runs in behind and trouble that Golden Arrow side. And when you just have a look at Kaizer Chiefs overall, I just think that they were poor, and there's not one player for me who really had a good performance on the day. The only player I could say that within the first half had a couple of good moments was Nange for me, but throughout the game they were very lethargic. They just couldn't connect with regards to their passes. They couldn't progress the ball. They couldn't really grow into the game and impose themselves. And then when you move on then right along and have a look at Golden Arrows, so under Lishokolo Siyama, they do line up then in a 4-4-1-1. At times, it sort of becomes somewhat of a 4-2-3-1/4-5-1 in a sense, you know. So it does then at times does transition into different variations of a 4-4-1-1. And when you have a look then at this Golden Arrow side, in goals, they started with Ukumede, and then at right back, they started with Ndlovu, 2 centre-backs. Then as the right-sided centre-back, they started with Uzuke. As the left-sided centre-back, they started with Usibisi. And then as the left-back, then they did start with Manchian. And when you have a look at this Golden Arrow side, from a defensive perspective, I think they did very well on the day, especially considering then how they were able to defend their box. And also then when you consider the fact that it was very difficult for Kaizer Chiefs then to even create chances, and even when they did try to penetrate, they just couldn't find those balls in between. And I just think then the pressure and the intensity that this Golden Arrows defense that they would apply whenever then the ball went into zone 14, they always made sure then they applied the right amount of intensity and the right amount of pressure. And Kaizer Chiefs then just couldn't penetrate into the final third. And even then, Kaizer Chiefs just didn't create enough clear-cut chances. And on the day, then I was very impressed with Zuke's performance. I think he was very solid at the heart of defense. Moving on then, right along within the heart of midfield, they did start then with Utube and Dlamini. I was most impressed with Dlamini within the heart of midfield with regards to then how he was able to control the heart of midfield and just ensure then that he was able to progress the ball for this Golden Arrow side. He was also then able then to ensure that he does protect the ball well and at times rotate it whenever then that forward and progressive pass wasn't on. And when you move on then right along and have a look at their right wing. So they did start with Cele and they then started with Modi, but a lot of the times they would interchange, and I was most impressed then with Upule Modi. And when you have a look at Upule Modi, then I think this is a player who also had a good performance, and on the day I think that he actually should have scored a goal within the first half, where then he makes that beautiful run in behind and he had a chance. And when you also then consider the fact that Upule Modi was a menace in this game, because what Upule Modi was doing very well is that he was offering this Golden Arrow side positional superiority with regards to then how he drift in between the lines, and how then he was just sort of occupying this free role, and he was very influential then for this Golden Arrow side with regards then to progressing the ball and ensuring then that he's able to play in those tight pockets of space. And also then when he did get that chance in behind, I think that he really should have scored there. And his speed as well, it just proved too much for Kaizer Chiefs on the day. And then when you move on right along, they did start with Usbia just behind the striker, knocks Mutizwa up front. He did then get that goal where then he does ensure that he then chips Bruce Bavuma, and ensuring then that Golden Arrows went 1-0. And when you have a look at it then from an overall perspective, I just think that Golden Arrows were the superior side on the day. They just had more quality, they had more intensity, they had more urgency. And when you also have a look at the fact that how they managed the game then from a defensive perspective, they defended their box very well. And what I also then liked about Golden Arrows is that they were able to create so many clear-cut chances, especially in the first half. I just think that Golden Arrows should have wrapped up the game within the first half. Within the first half, I think that they should have gone at least 2 or 3 goals up, and they should have been well ahead and got the game out of sight for this Kaizer Chiefs side. And when you have a look at Kaizer Chiefs, then I just think that they were poor on the day, and especially then considering then how then they look to institute their mid and their high block. And I say that because with regards then to instituting a mid or a high block, first of all, it's very important then that if you are then going to institute a mid to a high block, it's very important then that you put pressure on the ball, because if you don't put pressure on the ball, there's that ball that gets played in behind, because that space in behind. And that's what our Arrows were able to do. They were able to play that ball in behind a couple of times, and that's because there was no pressure then with regards to their high block. And when you have a look then at their mid block, I just think that they were not able to manage the spaces with regards then to the lateral and the vertical spaces in between the lines. And that's why then it was easy for Golden Arrows to grow into the game, to play in between the lines, where then you had Pule Mori coming in and offering then that positional superiority, where then he was able then to ensure that he does offer this Golden Arrow side that creativity within those tight pockets of spaces, And overall then, I just think it was a very poor performance by Kaizer Chiefs, and they were just lethargic and they lacked quality on the day. With Golden Arrows, this is a massive 3 points, as they have been very inconsistent. They've also conceded a lot of goals, and they do find themselves in quite the delicate position, because they're in a position where, as much as it may seem that they are a couple of points ahead from the relegation zone, but this was the type of game where they really had to win and get those 3 points, because then it would give them that cushioning and allow them then that breathing space. Because with Golden Arrows, then I must commend Lihloko Nolosiema with regards to how he sets up, with regards to his game model, his defensive structure, how he looks to press, and the intensity that he plays at with regards to his Golden Arrows side. I just think that they just have to have a lot more quality within the final third, because they play really good football, they play at a high intensity, they press well, they just lack that quality within the final third. However, on the day then, it is Kaizer Chiefs 0, Golden Arrows 1. Thank you very much for tuning in to yet another special episode of Diski Talk with Liolo. It was DSTV Premiership action at FNB Stadium as Golden Arrows walk away with all 3 points. Babi Zebonke signing out.